everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
So last week, we talked about how to work with triggers.
Yes.
And this is part of like our kind of self-awareness journey coaching that we've developed over the years.
Yeah.
And in that episode, we talked a lot about authentic versus actor self.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think we should dive deeper into that concept because I think it's such a core piece of the self-awareness journey.
Yeah. I agree. And you know, for those that are newer listeners or who have not checked out the Self-Awareness Journey website, I do want to remind people that the content that you and I are talking about right now was actually put together in course as a free course. I don't remember how many lessons there are. I feel like there's like eight or nine lessons. I mean, I'm laughing because we create all this amazing stuff and then we forget that we do. But anyhow, just kind of revisiting some of that and the value and importance of true self-awareness. It doesn't come just because you read a book and suddenly you're interested. You know, it that maybe spurs you into wanting to become more aware, but really, truly, the act of self-awareness comes through practice and awareness. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you can't have self-awareness without awareness. And yet, if you're not particularly aware, how do you become more self-aware? Right? So I think that this is this is like the gateway to that, which is beginning to understand how you behave in different situations, you know.
How you behave and, to me, how you're feeling.
Yes, exactly.
So, like an example for me about this like authentic versus actor self thing is, you know, like I'm the CEO of this company that I started, you know, a long time ago, 27 years ago.
It's actually
and, you know, like I went to art school. I started this software company and lo and behold, fast forward like many decades, you know, it's a whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a thing. Many employees and employees' family members, and
right.
Yes,
yeah. But maybe halfway through kind of my journey, you know, when we were kind of in startup, it was fine. You know, it was like we're a little strappy company. It was like not that hard.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was not that hard, but it was easy to kind of be myself, right?
Yeah.
But then I would start getting into these situations where I'd go have to meet with other CEOs and other business people. And when I would get into those situations, I had like a ton of imposter syndrome. I'm like, these folks are way smarter than me. They know how to run businesses. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I felt so uncomfortable. And what that caused is for me to kind of like act differently than who I really was. I tried to act smarter. I tried to act like I knew what I was talking about more. I tried to act like I had my, you know.
Like you had your act together?
My act together, which I didn't. So how that was coming across externally, probably everyone knew, you know. But more for me, it was like such an internal turmoil. It was really hard for me to be in those situations.
Yeah. So, you know, I would like to frame this and to talk about even the start of how this occurs, because you were able to notice that and you were flip-flopping between your feelings and how you were supposed to act because you'd had years of experience doing that already. You know, so like if you think when we were kids, like when you talk, like first of all, we should probably talk a little more about when we say the authentic versus actor self, because I think when you and I reference the authentic self, we're always talking about when we're in our true centered state. We talked a lot about that in the last pod, where everything that you think, say, and do is in alignment with each other and it just feels really easy, you know, and that would be your definition of authentic. But there are a lot of things that kick us out of feeling that way and feeling uncomfortable or triggered by something so that we have a subconscious or a conscious shift to being an actor, which is the really great example that you just illustrated. And I think that happens even as little kids in our family units. You know, you act a certain way, you look up, you see your parent or your caregiver gives you the face, or there's a consequence to your natural state of who you are that you don't perceive as very positive.
Yep.
And so you suddenly feel like you have to pop right over and behave or act differently, even if your feelings aren't in alignment with that.
Yeah, so you're like modifying your behavior based on like the social things happening around you.
Yeah, exactly. And some of them can be very subtle. So by the time we're 4 years old, we're set. We already have these habits ingrained in us. We already have these ways of reading social cues and modifying ourselves, sometimes extremely in a very dramatic way, because we're just so desperately not wanting to cause a ruckus, you know?
Yeah. I like this idea that 4-year-olds should never modify their behaviors. Like 4-year-olds gone wild, they're just swinging from trees.
That's kind of what they do.
Well, it is interesting that you say, like, in that example, like we would never say, like, well, I wouldn't say we'd never say it, but like this idea that, you know, we want kids to be kids, right? We want them to follow their whims and enjoy life and things like that. But you're right, as parents, we're constantly trying to modify their behavior.
Yeah, because we want them to fit in and not make us look bad. So we put all this pressure on. And so if you just like expand that out to something beyond a 4-year-old, you just look at that in your family unit. Parents do the same thing. It's like, anything that my kid does is a reflection on me. So they had better act. How many times did your parents say to you? Well, they did to me all the time. Probably never to you. Mrs. Parker would never say this to you. Hi, Mrs. Parker. It's been a while since I said hi.
So, I mean, you know, there wasn't a lot to say.
But how many times do you, and people making fun of the fact that their parents would say, now you better act very politely when you're there. You better behave yourself. And so I think this whole idea of us having our natural way of being, but then also having this actor self that we pop into frequently, I really want to make sure that we're not judging our actor selves, because I think that that's not what this is about. This isn't making authentic good actor bad. It's these are all very complex parts of who we are and how we behave based on how we're feeling in the situation we're in.
And there is, to me, there is some basis for why we modify our behaviors, because we are tribal beings, right? Like human beings are tribal animals. So fitting in with the tribe, fitting in with the group is like a survival instinct.
Totally.
Because if we're outcast from the group and we're living in the woods by ourselves, it's hard to survive. We need our group to survive.
Right, exactly. So standing out can actually cause us huge problem. Yeah, but it's funny though, because then we end up overusing that skill of bopping out of ourselves because of fear, because of the unknown. Something triggers us, like we talked about last week, so much. You know, we get triggered, and so we pop out of our authentic self for fear of not being accepted or loved. And so we then end up behaving in a way. And I want to just frame a little bit about some of the things that are going on around us, because in my coaching experience, what I have found numerous times is when I ask somebody, do you recognize the actor's self when I describe it? And a lot of times people will say, no, I don't know when I don't know when I am. But then I'll say, picture someone around you, and I will use the exact same descriptions, and they'll be like, oh, absolutely, I know this person does this all the time. So we almost put up a protective wall around ourselves so that we don't judge ourselves because it's too painful from how much we already are, right? But, you know, when you talk about the actor self, you can tell you're in your actor self, I think, by how it feels around you, how your environment feels around you. Because like you were describing, you know, like I started having to do all this stuff in this role, and I wasn't used to being in that role. So I bet you, if you were to go back to those moments, you would have said that my environment around me felt a little competitive. Like I was in this state of constantly wanting to redo something or do something really well and keep doing it until I nailed it. And constant self-evaluation. Am I doing this well? You know, and wanting to do and look a certain way. Those are all markers of when you know you are behaving in your actor self. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, like, the first like CEO roundtable meeting I went to.
Yeah.
Like I still remember, and this was like 15 years ago. Like I still remember the room. Like,
yes,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
Like, it was pretty impactful because I felt so like such an imposter. It had a pretty big impact. And you're right. That whole the first couple months I was in that group, you know, I was trying to make sure all my stuff was done perfect. I was way overthinking everything. You know, that's probably quite a bit quieter than maybe normal.
Yeah,
because
but you were still you.
Yeah, and I didn't want to misspeak, and I was very gently handling everything.
Yeah. And I think that then speaks to the feelings that we have when we're in our actor self, because they're very distinct. Feelings within the actor self when you're living in this space is you feel anxious, you feel potentially exposed, like you're going to be found out. You may even be defensive in certain situations. You don't really like how you feel or want your feelings. You're just like, no, I don't want to worry about that. I want to think about it. And you are worrying a lot. And it really is a play on ego. And we all have ego. Ego is a very important piece of who we are. So ego isn't always bad. However, if it moves too far in that direction, then it does become a liability at that stage. And we start to, that constant state of redoing and constant state of self-evaluation is because we're trying to say to our ego, we're cool, man. We got this. We're better than everybody, because we overdo these things because we feel so uncomfortable with the authentic truth of who we really are in those moments.
Yeah. It's so interesting when it's like, you know, we talk about like, it's like, two sides of the same coin a little bit. Like we kind of talk like we're flipping back and forth, which I think is somewhat true. But to me, there's a bit of element here where, like, do you know your authentic self without also knowing your actor self a bit? Like you need to understand both. It's almost like when you move over to your actor self and then you start recognizing that you're over there, you can look over and say, oh, my authentic self is back over there,
sitting
and you
there
get to know that person
waiting
a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting call out, because I think we have a tendency to make ourselves wrong whenever we have feelings that pop up. And we should probably do a pod on the feelings lesson, because I think that's a really, really good one too. I love that we're not doing these in order. You know, it's like there's a pretty scripted order in which you can begin to uncover more of your authentic self and you know, grow in your self-awareness in our coursework. But I think it's an interesting thing, because this is the reality of who we are. You know, situationally, you know, if you look at politics today, there's so many things. And we just, you know, recently lost a pope. Like there's so many big, huge, monumentous things changing in the world right now. And people are not knowing how to feel, or their feelings, they can't hide their feelings like they could before, or their feelings are becoming more amplified. And that's that authentic, you know, that's your authentic you. That's your inner you.
Yeah.
And we just feel like sometimes we can't bring it along with us all the time, so we have to pack it away and keep it safe.
I agree. There's a lot of things happening because, you know, I was talking about kind of my own self-image, I guess. And when I'm talking about imposter syndrome, but you've got a lot of, and most of us have a lot of other things happening, like even externally, right? There's like lots of expectations of how we should be.
Right, exactly.
Right? If I'm, you know, there's expectations about how I should act at work, how I should, you know, what things I need to do at home. And those things are maybe kind of put onto us.
Right. Right.
Which causes us, I am the breadwinner for our house, so I do have to go grind it out at work every single day. And I do have to go do these things. I do have to go do those things. When maybe what I actually want to do is just like make art in a hermitage.
I feel like all of our pods come right to this inflection. Can I just?
But I only illustrate that is that like sometimes I feel like this like a big chunk of our life could actually be in this actor self space.
Yeah, I think it's most of it, to be honest.
Rebelling against it, it feels so weird to say I don't want to do that. I'm going to kind of quote rebel against it.
Yeah.
Or do the contrarian thing,
which actually keeps you in the actor self even more. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, that's really true. I think that we all have to exist in our lives with a certain set of expectations, whether we are putting them on ourselves or others. There's just a lot of expectation in the world and in our own, in living where we live. There are expectations, the kind of vehicles you drive, how you dress, do you wear jewelry, do you have tattoos? I mean, all the physical stuff. Do you have a job? Do you live with your parents? Are you taking care of your parents? Are you doing a good enough job with that? Are you providing for there's so many things that are constantly pushing on us. But but what I would really like to call out here is that with all of these external expectations, living in our authentic self actually makes it much easier to do those things. I actually think that this is true because none of those things are going to change. These are all going to exist. But what we're really talking about is our relationship with ourselves moving through our day and through our lives. And you can, in bed, you're waking up in the morning and you open up your eyes and you're just starting to kind of come alive, come awake, and you are in your authentic space. You are authentically you. Everything has reset over a good sleep most of the time, and you are now in this aligned state. Now, depending on how fast our brain works, we may be out of that aligned state within 60 seconds of waking up because we start jumping into all the stuff. However, that's a space to start saying, oh, wait a minute, how does this feel? How do I feel right now? Everything is in alignment. And, I started talking about some of the feelings when you're in the actor self, but here it's just everything feels easy. It's easy for you to think things through. It's easy for you to have some gratitude and some calmness. You're really satisfied with yourself in that moment. And then the minute you've got a toothbrush in your mouth, a minute later or what have you, depending on how your brain is working, you may already be moving into that actor space.
What is really interesting to me is like the language we use around some of this stuff. And when you were describing that, I was thinking like, oh yeah, those moments before reality set in is the way I was going to describe that. But then I was thinking,
oh, it's
wait, what do you mean reality sets in? Like my reality is all this external pressure, right? Or is my reality my authentic self? Is this like which reality is it?
Or is your reality is reality your sense of how to participate in what is?
Yeah.
I think that's probably more accurate, but it's awfully hard it's awfully hard to split hairs like that when you're in your emotional body. But I think our goal here is to understand that there are these external pressures, and us jumping into trying to solve things for other people puts us in our actor selves. And it's a much harder to be in our actor selves than it is to be in our authentic selves. And a lot of times we think, but we have to do that to produce, to be successful. Those are the things that we have to fake it. That's not true. That is not true. We're just so used to listening to our brain that tells us what to do versus our inner being voice that is always guiding us. We get so used to jumping into what the brain says we're supposed to do, and it spins us out of control.
Yeah. That we're supposed to do. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this juxtaposed position between understanding your authentic self and your actor self, I think it's really important to break it down like this, to sort of give your heart and soul and mind some stuff to think about and to participate with in this journey of, wait a second, how am I when I'm in my real authentic self? How does that feel? How does my body feel? What am I thinking about? How well am I producing my work that I want to produce? How am I interacting with my friends and my family and the people that I want to get to know?
Yeah.
Like really understanding that, and then also looking at it from that space when you just are on stage, man, and you are just like trying to command the room, trying to get stuff done, pushing through your agenda, all of those things. And also just taking an inventory on that as well, really understanding those differences, because then you can start to figure out how to be a little closer to that authentic continuum versus the actor.
Yeah, earlier you said something really interesting, that you thought maybe we spend the majority of our time in actor self. If we spend so much time in that state, how do we even start to recognize that we're in there? It's
exactly right.
It's like if we're in the forest, it just all looks like a forest.
Right, exactly. And that's why it's so important to start understanding, are you feeling competitive? Are you feeling like you're redoing stuff for yourself all the time? Are you evaluating yourself all the time? Do you get, do you go to lunch and start thinking, oh, I should have done this, and how come I can't get that done? And, if you're having a lot of spin like that, that is your actor self. That is your actor self. And again, I want to just say it again. I feel like I should say it 10 times on this pod, is that that's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's an is thing. And understanding what pushes you into that mode, that is what's going to help you to learn how to spend more time in your
And that's why we were
space.
talking last week about triggers. This is why it's in reverse order.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of those triggers are the things that push you into that actor self state.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we have that visual of the roadmap on the website. And I just really love that roadmap because it shows you all the, comparatively what it feels and looks like in the actor self when you're away from home, and your authentic self when you're in your home base. And being able to recognize those things, the environment, what you're thinking about, how you're focusing on things, your emotions, all of that.
Yeah, you talk about the 3 R's, right? Recognize, reflect, and refocus as a technique. So talk to me a little bit about, we've been talking about recognize, but again, what kind of action, or how do we start to recognize that we're in actor self, or how do we start zooming out to see that we're in that state?
I feel like if you've never had the awareness to think about it like this, it might take you just a bit to unpack how to figure this out, right? Like how to even notice actor self. But here's the deal. If you're not feeling good inside, you're probably in your actor self in some regard. So that's the first thing. And so reflecting on that and thinking to yourself, okay, I don't feel good. What doesn't feel good? Like this is literally, and you know what? I still to this day will do this, but I've gotten really fast at it. But like if I hang up the phone, I might have a little pit in my stomach from a conversation, just real subtle. And I might say to myself, oh, wait, so what is that? Something doesn't feel right. And I literally stop what I'm doing. And I'll say, okay, what is this about? What is the source of this little twinge that I'm feeling? And then I'll be like, oh, this part of a conversation. I'm not satisfied. I could feel the person switch a little bit right at that point. Or I said something that I'm not happy how I said it. Or they said something that I don't feel good about. So that's one way, is just when you have that little niggling in your body, that's your body's way of trying to tell you, hey, something doesn't feel right. But most of the time, we're so used to turning those feelings off because we have not been encouraged to use them for what they are intended for. The feelings are simply telling us what's going on. So learning to have an awareness of your feelings is a first huge thing. You can do that by journaling. I have some clients that use like gratitude journals, or for 5 minutes, they'll just list out 5 things that they're happy about, or what their focus for the day is, or anything like that, like something they're proud of, or what they want to move towards. That's a really good way of just taking your inventory. However you feel it best that you can take your inventory. Maybe you're in your car driving to the grocery store. I don't know. But noticing in your body, and then just trying to get some correlation between, what am I thinking about that just made my body react like that? What am I thinking about that just gave me a stomach ache? right? Or I have a headache, and it's a tension headache because it feels very specific when it's stress. And I always, these stress headaches, what is this from? And exploring that a little bit. So I think that's a really good way to start figuring that out.
And then the last one, refocus.
Yeah.
Like, how do you refocus, right? We've recognized that now we're a little off center or in our actor self. How do we get back?
Yeah. I feel like, whenever there is, a lot of times when we're first trying to learn something new, we don't get to it. We don't see it until it's big. Like a subtlety might be harder to understand than something major. Like if you lose it with your spouse, that's pretty easy to understand what triggered you. But if something's just irritating you and it's just scratching at you, you don't notice that as quickly, right? But so as you're learning at the beginning, you might have these really big expanded feelings, and then you realize, oh, okay, yeah, I'm all out. I'm not doing well. So in order to refocus at that point, usually about the only thing you can do is what we call switching segments. So leave the room, stop having the conversation that you're having. Someone else comes in the room that changes the segment, or you can sleep, or you can meditate. Sometimes just going to bed for the night on a bad day,
for sure.
you'll be reset then in the morning.
Yep.
Most of the time.
I thought you were going to say chocolate.
Well,
disappointed.
That is a staple. That is a staple for all things. Chocolate helps everything. Especially I'm really into like salted caramel chocolate right now. Oh, so good.
But there are some things like that can kind of like reground you once you notice you're off kilter. During like a particular like difficult part of my life, whenever I would feel myself get triggered, I would go get a hot cup of tea and hold the hot mug.
Yeah,
as like a way to like reground myself.
Right. Yeah, and bring you back into your body.
Yeah, so some of these like even small physical things can really help bring you back.
Yes. And I want to be really encouraging here because, when people talk about this or when we talk about this, some people become kind of fearful or dread. They dread this idea of understanding what some of this stuff is all about for themselves. But I just want to be encouraging and say, you just can't know how awesome it is once you sort this out. You just can't know how good it feels to live in your authentic self more than not, and not worry about what everybody else thinks, not worry about if you're surrounded by competition, because you're doing you on your best day. And it is such a wonderful feeling. And when you start to get that momentum, you can continue to build that momentum. Yep. And it is a really fun place to be. It really is.
Like being that 4-year-old that just does whatever they want all the time. It's awesome.
Which brings us back to chocolate.
Well, this is awesome. You're always so good at framing this stuff up and explaining it and helping guide through it.
Yeah, well, thank you. So are you. I always love how we take opposite approaches and end up in the same space almost every single time. But yeah, I think that understanding what triggers us into behaving in ways that we're not really happy about later, that's where the work is. This isn't even talking about any of the external stuff that is a result of anything. This is simply you and you. How do you get to know yourself differently? And
it's a daily practice.
Absolutely.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.